Well, joining me in the studio is Brendon O'Connor from the US Studies Centre at Sydney University. Brendon, welcome. And in Washington, we've got Lisa Miller. We might go to Lisa Miller first. Lisa, just first of all, can you describe to us the significance of this State of the Union address in the political calendar?
Joe, it's more significant than previous addresses, that's for sure, and especially what we've seen in the last couple of weeks with that terrible shooting in Tucson. Certainly tonight we're seeing something that we haven't seen before, which is Democrats and Republicans all swapping seats, and rather than having the dividing line down between the middle of them, they're sitting next to each other, so they're calling it date night here in Washington DC. So we're only minutes away from the speech starting, but I'm told that the vibe already on Capitol Hill is very different from what we've seen previously, but certainly this is a very big moment for Barack Obama. There's a lot at stake.
Okay, Lisa. Now, Brendon O'Connor, how is Barack Obama faring going into this?
Well, he's had a very good month. Quite surprisingly, his party, the Democratic Party, got what he described as a shellacking in November in the midterm elections. And Obama, in some ways, has played well off this new political climate. He's reached out to the Republicans. He extended the Bush tax cuts, which was something the Republican Party were very keen to do. And he's positioned himself as a man of compromise, someone who can, bridge the gap between the two major parties. He's someone, who, I suppose, who hits that theme of healing, renewal very well. We saw that in Tucson last week in a speech he made. So I think it's in fact been a pretty good time for Obama, and his opinion poll ratings have gone up as a result of it.
Yeah, Tucson seems to be a significant milestone in his presidency, actually. Lisa Miller, we can be sure he's going to be referring to that vacant seat. Will there be a vacant seat for Gabrielle Giffords?
There will be a vacant seat, Joe, and there will be survivors of that incident there in the audience, as well as the parents of the 9-year-old girl who was killed. But interestingly, there was a bit of chatter around the place about whether he would refer to gun control in his speech, because after that shooting, a lot of people were calling for tighter gun laws in America, and even earlier today, the political insiders were being told by the White House to stay tuned about whether there would be any mention of gun control in the speech. But I have seen a copy of the speech, and I can tell you that there is no mention of gun control. In fact, he refers to Tucson, but only as a reason why the country should put partisanship aside and should band together to, as a kind of rallying call, nothing about any changes to any gun laws.
Okay, Lisa, we're just carrying live shots there from Capitol Hill. We can see Michelle Obama has entered Congress and is taking her seat. Brendon O'Connor, how valid is it for a president's popularity to turn on a response to a particular event like Tucson rather than his legislative achievements?
Well, I think that's when you get a chance for the public to look at you anew, to look at you again and say, well, in a crisis, this person is the type of president we want. They make us feel better about ourselves in some ways, or at least they make us think about ourselves in ways that might be appropriate to such a tragedy. So it did give Obama a moment, and it was a moment where he hit on that theme that he's very good at, one of hitting on personal biography, people's stories, the stories of those who died. And he very much, had one of his strongest speeches of his presidency in Tucson last week. But today he's got to deliver more of a policy speech than what was almost, a speech at a funeral or wake, a memorial speech that he gave last week.
Okay, Lisa Miller, I'm not sure if you can see a monitor there, but we're just seeing Hillary Clinton and members of the cabinet coming into Congress. And it's amazing how this Obama-Clinton team has worked. There was a lot of speculation that it would possibly implode, but it seems to have worked pretty effectively.
I'm just watching those shots as well, Joe, and you're right, it has been one of the most successful pairings that people have seen in Washington DC, and one that started on very rocky ground. But certainly she's done so well in the job as Secretary of State that there are suggestions perhaps she should be bumped up to vice presidential candidate next time, perhaps even looking after the Pentagon and the Defence Department, which of course has big budget blowouts and a lot of woes ahead of it with Afghanistan and Iraq. But Hillary Clinton has given every indication that she's quite happy in the job that she has, and most people are
giving her very high
marks. Well, no, it would have been surprising a few years ago, but look, I think she has just got to a point where she's quite tired, to be honest. When people talk about her making another presidential run, I think it's the last thing she feels like doing. It's interesting looking at that crowd, Joe, because there are going to be about 1,000 people on Capitol Hill tonight, guests of the various members of the Congress as well as the members themselves. But watching it on televisions around this nation will be 48 to 50 million people. That's about half the number of people who watch the Super Bowl, and you know how Americans feel about the Super Bowl. So that's a pretty extraordinary number. So what Brendon was saying about how that speech in Tucson gave President Obama such a lift in the job approval ratings, it reminded people why they liked him, why they voted for him in the first place. And that's why people are expecting this speech tonight to not be the laundry list of policy wishes that we've seen in the past. It's still going to be a very lengthy speech, well over an hour probably by the time he wraps it up, when you count in all the applause breaks, of which there are normally many. But certainly it is going to be, the expectation is that it is going to be a different speech to that which we've seen before, a rallying call. It's called Winning the Future. That's the theme of the speech, but some wags have already said, yes, winning the future in 2012. That's the only thing President Obama needs to win at the moment. And of course he's going to have an eye to the presidential campaign. The next 2 years are going to be so very critical, and what he does for America over the next 6 months, and how he deals with the Republicans and tries to isolate the way they want to fix the economy, which with the way that he wants to fix the economy, that's going to be the real, where the battle lines are drawn over the next 12 months.
Well, Brendon O'Connor, we heard from Barack Obama at the very beginning of his presidency about reaching across the aisle, and that basically hasn't happened. It sounds like in this speech, from the excerpts that we've heard, that he's going down that path once again. Is there any likelihood over the next year or so that that mood is going to change at all, and will Tucson have any impact on that?
Bipartisanship is something that all new presidents promised when they came to town. I mean, George W. Bush promised that he would be a uniter, not a divider, and he was someone who really split the parties apart. Obama, I think, is quite sort of temperamentally suited to suggest that he can bring people together of different ilks.
But that hasn't worked so far, has it?
No, I mean, it's one of those things that I think tends to be a lot more about rhetoric, and it's what the public expects. The public wants cooperation, but politics is often about staking a position, believing in it, and going for it, and that's often quite partisan. And these two things don't mix together very well. One of the interesting things for the viewers in tonight's State of the Union in America will be that Democrats and Republicans are going to sit in a mingled way, some of them at least, in the chamber, and that's quite unusual. So we won't get Democrats all jumping up and clapping and Republicans sitting down. There might be a little less clapping as a result, or at least it will be more mixed up in our vision. These events are often dragged on a lot by the amount of applause, because they're in some ways a pep rally for the president's party.
To what extent could Tucson have an effect on bipartisanship over the next year?
I think it won't have a massive effect. I mean, I think that this will be, there's been a few weeks where the debate in Washington is toned down. I think it's sensible if some of the over-the-top rhetoric gets toned down. But the Republicans will believe their best chance is to stop Obama looking too dominant, looking as though he's getting his way too much. To thwart his efforts on this front was how they got to the Republican victory in the House of Representatives in November, and I think that will be their tactic in the lead up to the next presidential election, to say, look, this guy really can't deliver. He's fairly ineffectual. So there's not a lot of incentive for the Republicans to cooperate, and the Democrats don't want to cooperate with ideas like repealing healthcare reform, which the Republicans put on the table last week.
Okay, Lisa Miller, what is still on Barack Obama's political agenda over the next year, and what hope has he got of getting any of it through?
There is just one word, Joe, that you're going to hear over and over again tonight, and that is jobs. His own job approval rating might be up, but it's the jobs of Americans that he has to find. That's the challenge for him.
It's still close to 10%, isn't it?
The unemployment rate is 9.4%. Yes, in some states though it's way higher, and that is what tonight is going to be all about: fixing the economy. That's where the interesting split comes with the Republicans, because both sides agree fixing the economy is the #1 priority. They disagree on how it should be done. When Barack Obama talks about more investment, the Republicans hear government spending.
Lisa, I might just interrupt you there, because I think we're just coming to the point where Barack Obama will enter. So the President is making his entrance there. Sorry for interrupting you, Lisa. Jobs will be the centrepiece.
That's all right, Joe. It's going to take him a long time to walk down that aisle, trust me. In fact, there's competitions for where people sit, so they can sit closest to the aisle, maybe even snatch an autograph or a photograph. I mean, these might be members of Congress, but they can still be groupies when they want to be.
They certainly can. I noticed when Hillary Clinton was walking down there, she looked a bit flustered. She didn't know which way to look. So many people were yelling out a name.
I just wanted to make a point, Joe, about what happens after the speech, which is the Republican rebuttal. And tonight we have an interesting situation where we've got two different Republicans offering rebuttal. One, the official Republican Party that will be carried live by the networks. That's going to be Representative Paul Ryan. But the Tea Party is also putting up someone, Michelle Bachmann, who is the Tea Party's leading light in Congress. Well, she's going to deliver a rebuttal as well. So there's been talk that this sign of there being two differing speeches, it's like the budget in Australia when the opposition leader gets up the next night to deliver the response to the budget. Imagine if you had two people delivering that response from the opposition. That's what's going to be happening here after this speech from Barack Obama.
Well, the Greens kind of nearly got a look in this last year, but they're not doing as well as the Tea Party at the moment, I don't think. But just looking at Barack Obama there, Brendon O'Connor, it does seem that he still does have a bit of that aura, and there's a bit more of a spring in his step now than there had been over say 6 months ago.
Yes, I think so. I think he's had a chance to rethink his presidency. He's got a few new members in. He's got a new chief of staff. And I think the draft of the speech I've seen suggests he's going to talk a lot about education as well, which I think is a theme very much close to his own heart. He'll talk about new strategies for both R&D type education, so at the higher university end, but I think all across America. So that I think is probably something that will come out a lot in the speech. Investment, as Lisa says, jobs will be a huge theme, and I think he'll probably start off referring to the events in Tucson to keep that momentum going and draw on that speech that he gave last week as a starting point.
What are the dangers of his health reforms being unpicked by the Republicans, as there had been some talk of that possibly happening?
I think he'll maybe use the speech tonight to suggest that he's going to hold very firm on health care, that this will be, I think for Obama, one massive part of his legacy. People are already calling it Obamacare. I think he is very, very keen to see the current legislation to remain intact. And I think he'll use probably a few examples of people who otherwise would have been cut off health care in their dying days or in very difficult circumstances. So to use individuals, which is very much how he likes to do it, to tell a story and then connect that to legislation.
Is there a danger, though, that regardless of what he says tonight, that the Republicans could work to unravel some of the health reform that he has already passed?
They don't have the votes in the Senate. They've passed a bill in the House of Representatives, but for something to come into law, it needs to go through the Senate, and then Obama could veto it. The Democrats have enough numbers in the Senate to block it, so the Republicans would have to make deals. So it would be, I think, on technical issues, some changes could occur, but the larger package, I think, is largely going to remain.
Okay. Lisa,
and Joe, if I could just say, that he certainly in the speech is going to indicate a little bit of compromise to tinker around the edges of that legislation, but it's not negotiable as far as he's concerned. So Brendon's absolutely right there. This speech tonight is an attempt by him to rally the nation, to look at a broad vision for the future, to be that leader that gives them a reason to wake up tomorrow. And he wants to try and box the Republicans into being a narrow-minded party, looking at the smaller issues. That's what he is going to try and achieve with this speech tonight.
And judging by the length of the applause, it looks like we could be in for quite a long State of the Union address. We might leave it now to President Barack Obama at Capitol Hill.